Hi and welcome to the first video of a new playlist. We're going to look at the Cessna 152 this time, so it's a simpler aircraft. This set of videos, I'm not going to go over the basics. That has all been covered in a previous playlist, so if you need to have details of how I did some of the things, how you actually enter data, you're going to need to look back at the playlist, and I'll put a card up somewhere at the top so you can link straight to that. So if you really need the details of the basics, that's where to go. I'm going to kind of hurry through this and just show you the settings that I've got. So we're doing the 152, which for me is slightly nostalgic because this looks almost identical to the only actual general aircraft I've flown. I've flown gliders a fair bit, but I only had one power flight lesson as a birthday present, nearly 40 years ago now. And the call sign that I use on Flight Simulator Golf Bravo Mike is the actual call sign of the C152 that I had one lesson in. So let's have a look at what we're going to try and achieve. So this is the layout, and it really is pretty much identical to the one that I was in. So it's my only flight, so all a bit hazy, but it does seem very similar. For those old enough in Britain to remember Triumph Herald, it was pretty much like sitting in a Triumph Herald with wings. It was a very tight fit, shoulder to shoulder with the instructor, and we're not big. He wasn't big and I'm not a big person, so very cramped space. Anyway, it's a much simpler layout, no autopilot, so we've just got a radio stack here. So we've got one here which does comms and VOR, and a second one here, and a transponder. And that's it really, and the audio stack here. So that's the instrumentation basically, and over here you'll see that there is an ADF as well, so that's parked over there. And the only gauges we've got the usual 6-pack kind of thing there, and over here we've got a rev counter and an ammeter. Not even a voltmeter, an ammeter, just to show the flow. And down here, it's the only gauges we got are fuel and temperature. There's no exhaust gas temperature, so mixing is a bit of a dark art, and no fuel flow, no fuel pump. So we've got a primer here, so it squirts some fuel into the carburetor. So we've got a primer to deal with, and a slightly different parking brake, but really it's only the graphics that's changed. And we've got those switches, but again they're not in the same order as the 172, which is the last aircraft that we did, but they are pretty much the same, except we haven't got a fuel pump. We have got the light, the dome light, which shines a white light onto the instrument panel for night operations. It's too bright to fly with, but for setting up it's quite a nice light for that. And in the center here we've got the slight difference, let's just zoom back a little bit here, that we've got a carb heat that pulls out and goes in, so we've got an extra thing there to deal with. So that's pretty much it. That's what we're going to look at to start with, and today's one we were going to just look at the Stream Deck with X's and O's and quickly get through the Stream Deck. So the Stream Deck layout is much simpler, and what I actually did was, in the preferences here, I took that one here and I duplicated it, renamed it so that all the switches were pretty much there, and then I edited it, deleted some bits and made some edits. First edit I've made, of course, is that, as ever, there's a graphical change to the switches. They don't look the same, so a quick screenshot there of them both in their on and off position. So that's the off, there's the on. So I've just took some screenshots and used a different graphic here. What I've also done though is I've used the text here rather than drawing little things that don't really exist in real life. I've just changed the text so it's red when it's off, and in the on state it's green, so that as I click on the switches here, if I just click on there, it's interesting, there it is, it's on now. So you can see the landing light here is on and there and off, and same for the taxi. So as you rotate a rocker, because the graphic isn't that easy to see the difference on, I've just highlighted it using green text. So if I turn the taxi lights on, it comes up in green text on the Stream Deck. Stream Deck's very slow responding at the moment. I'm not quite sure why. I've got Axes and O's working on a separate screen, so yeah, just to remind you, have actually got Axes and O's up and running. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refresh this, and hopefully that will speed things up a little bit. So let's just try that. Yep, that's working faster. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just run along the switches. So obviously I had to change the order of the switches to match what's on here, but the actual functions are exactly the same as on the C152. So this one here, we're using a key event to toggle. It's a toggle from the Lorby Axes and O's add-on, and we're toggling the landing lights, and we're sending a value of 1, and we're reading the variable light landing boolean. That's the one we have to read to find out whether it's on or off, and that determines what to send and what graphics to draw. So the on value is 1, and that's it. And then when we program it in, we click submit, and that's done. Taxi light, it's a toggle. It toggles the taxi lights, and we check light taxi boolean, and that's it. So the on value is 1, and we submit that. Beacon is unchanged, it's toggle beacon lights, and we look for the light beacon variable to see if it's on. If it's on, it's a 1, so that's all identical. So no puzzles here, apart from some say toggle and some don't. Depends on the age of the switch, I believe. So this is the strobes toggle. Again, we're setting the value 1, it's a key event, and we read light strobe boolean to see if it's on or not, and that's it. So there's the submit button. Nav is toggle nav lights, and we check light nav toggle, the boolean there, and that's it. There's the submit on there. The heater, pitot heat toggle, pitot heat boolean is our variable, and it's again all values of 1 to make sure it's on. That's dead easy. And here's the new one, the dome light, the one that shines the white light from the top onto the instrument panel, and it's actually toggle cabin lights, not dome. It's toggle cabin lights. We sort of switch it on and off, and we look for the light in the cabin to see if it's on or not. So it's just a toggle, so it's dead easy to program, and that's that. Okay, so that's all the switches done. We've got the primer here, and if you watch the primer in action, you click on it and it does a pump. In fact, if I turn the sound on, you'll probably hear it. Let's get some desktop sound in this. I usually keep the desktop sound muted so that you don't hear all the clicks and you don't hear the traffic driving past outside the aircraft. But that's the squelchy noise that you get. I'll put it back on mute again so we don't get the noise. So on the Stream Deck, the primer is actually just toggle primer 1. That's all it does. It's just a toggle, and it just does one action. So it hasn't not really an on-off, but that seems to work well. I did it as a toggle. Possibly it might work as an event, but it reads the value. If you watch the value happen, it goes from 1 straight back to 0 automatically. So it works quite well. So that's okay. Parking brake is exactly as before. There's no difference in the code. It's parking brakes. It's a toggle. It toggles the parking brakes, and your variable is the brake parking indicator, and it's a boolean. So that's what we're looking for to insert there. And again, we're looking for a 1. So all I did was I took a graphic for it being off and on. Just took a screenshot of this bit here, and so it looks like that and like that. So it is exactly the same. So I work my way across here, and we've got no avionics switch. the battery is connected directly to the bus, to the avionics bus. So you don't have to have an extra switch for that, so we can remove some switches. So it's exactly the same code as before, not changed it, in fact not changed the graphic either. The alternator, that's the alternator switch, works there. And the code for the alternator is toggle master alternator. It's a toggle event, and we're looking for this strangely one here, written one here, general engine master alternator, and there's no index or anything like that, it's just the general master, and it's a boolean. So that's what we're checking to see if it's on or not. Let's turn that off. Okay, so the next one across here is the battery, and again it's toggle master battery, and this one here is electrical master battery. No indexing or anything like that, so it's just the electrical master battery, checking that's on or not. Doesn't matter whether we send a 0 or 1, it really makes no difference, it just toggles, so that works there. And you can see probably over here, let's move up there, look, the avionics is all on. As soon as I turn the battery on, if I turn the battery off now, everything's off, so it's straight into the electrical bus for the battery. This is the Magneto decrement, so it turns the thing to the left. Again, I've not adjusted the graphics, it doesn't show the actual position, it just shows it in the left position. And this is an event, it's not a toggle, so it just moves it to the left. And because I don't need to know the position, because I'm not going to draw a graphic or anything like that, there's no variable to look at. And here it's the increment version. So if you want to see that in action, let's just change the view. So at the moment it's fully left, so if I press this one here, first click, takes it to the right magneto, left, and then if I click one more it'll take me to this both, and then it'll start. So, and if I take it with the other button, it takes it to the left, so we can do our magneto checks, and that works quite well. Got this mystery button here, which I'll deal with later. I'll leave that as a teaser for you, what that does and how I programmed it. It's really, I've programmed it onto my MIDI controller, my X-Touch MIDI controller. So I haven't programmed it here. It's much nicer to work with it actually on the on my X-Touch. So we've got a different graphic for the fuel, but it's exactly the same code. It's toggle fuel valve all, so it toggles it on and off, it's a toggle, and we're looking for general engine fuel valve, but this one is indexed fuel valve 1. It has to look for fuel valve 1 to see if it's on or off. Okay, and the on value is 1. And there's a submit button at the end. The fuel valve, if you're actually looking for it, is down here in between the seats. So that's it off and that's it on. Strangely enough, I actually had a conversation with someone who was taking lessons, and apparently the instructor turned it on and off and she never saw where it was, and she was just coming up to her first check ride and suddenly realised she had no idea where it was. So I knew from the flight simulator where it was, and she found it. That tickled me a little bit. 1-0 Microsoft, eh? Okay, so that's pretty much it. If we go back and look at the Stream Deck again, it's got a flaps indicator. The flaps indicator is hidden over here. If I go to the co-pilot seat, there's our flaps indicator. So I've kept that on my Stream Deck. Let's bring the Stream Deck back up again. So that's the same one as before that I've pinched from somebody else. Have been through the code for that before, but that gauge there. I've taken the rev counter there so I can see that pretty much, and I've got my mixture and my throttle percentages up just so I can see, make sure that it's responding properly. Again, there's no indicator of that in the real world. Here I've kept the exhaust gauge running. It does work, even though there isn't actually one on the screen on the actual cockpit itself, but I've kept that there just to help me manage the engine a little bit. Not quite so immersive. Okay, so these two here, the views and the radio stack, just work perfectly well. Okay, so the ones I did on the 172, I've just transferred them across and it works fairly well. Let's get to the radio stack. So you can see we've got the buttons pressed in the and let's go to the radio stack here. That we're on mic 1, and we haven't actually got a separate receive for the COM 1 and COM 2, but if I change it and switch in mic 2 now, and I'll do that using COM mic 2 here, you'll see that both my COM 1 and 2 are receiving, and both buttons gone in. And if I turn off the COM 1, I'm not receiving on both now. The logic does fail slightly sometimes. It gets itself into a bit of a knot, so I'm not too worried about that. I don't use both that often, but it works. And nav 1, that button works. So I press it if I want to receive the Morse code for nav 1, nav 2. You can see all the buttons just going out. The ADF, that works. There isn't any DME equipment on here, but the button functions, so I've programmed that in. And the marker works. We can actually get the inner and outer marker for approaching the aerodrome, so that works quite well. That's the marker there, so that's working fine. And the sensitivity, if you look up here, if I press the sensitivity, it flicks that switch. So I have not reprogrammed, I've not touched this at all since I did it on the 172 videos. Works absolutely fine. And let's put it back to mic 1. So there we're in mic 1. So that radio switch box works absolutely fine. So that's pretty much everything covered as far as the Stream Deck is concerned. Everything else is either on the yoke, the throttle quadrant for the yoke, or I use the yoke for controlling the views. I don't actually. I'll show you the views anyway. Let's have a look at the views. I don't use this very often. I've spent ages programming it, but I don't actually like it very much. Let's change it back to pilot view. It's got all these glitches that some things it doesn't like going into. There's the pilot view. And it doesn't like changing to it. Still haven't quite worked out what's going on behind that. Let's try. If I go to the instrument view, there you go to the pedal stall view, and then let's go back to pilot. Not really working very well, but we have got we can flick through the instruments and see the different views of the instruments. And some work and some don't. And the external view works quite well actually. The external view, I can flick around and see different views of the aircraft there. And if I reset that, press the reset button, we're back looking behind. So the external view works okay. Drone view works absolutely perfectly. So I can control mine with buttons on my yoke. So that all works absolutely fine. Busy parking today. And the fixed view, it does work, but there aren't so many fixed views on this aircraft. So there's the 0. 1 is the undercarriage view. 2 is one wing, and 3 is the other wing, and that's really it. None of the other views seem to be programmed in. If I flick along them, nothing happens. So that's that. So let's go back to the cockpit. Pilot. Okay, so that's it. That's everything that I've got programmed in. So the next video will be looking at well, actually we'll do the next video. We'll look at how I set this to work from my throttle quadrant. So we've got the carb heat on the throttle quadrant, so I'll do a whole video on that next. Okay, so see you in the next video.